Welcome to the TKO Show with Kara Ro. Thanks so much for joining me. At any time, you can text 10-1290 or email the TKO Show at bellmedia.ca. We're going to talk about the Bitcoin. Will the Bitcoin bubble burst in 2018? This is ongoing dialogue from people who know nothing about it to people who are already investing, because you always want to know what's coming next. We have seen it go up, 1,400%? That is unheard of. So we'll talk more about that. Then, how are your local communities working as a team to attract jobs? Leadership expert Greg Kozera joins us, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But we do have a lot more to get to as well. But first, we are going to address this issue. Will the Bitcoin bubble burst in 2018? And we're going to learn a little bit more about it. Elliott Prechter, he attended MIT in 2002 and ultimately joined Microsoft in 2006. In 2011, he helped start an algorithmic hedge fund in Vegas, and in 2012 joined Elliott Wave International. You can find them online, elliottwave.com. And what we're talking about, you can go /Bitcoin. He now serves as head of computer analysis, developing eWave's artificial intelligence system for Elliott Wave analysis. He also writes the open access publication eWave's Flash, which discusses trading theory and updates readers on program developments. And this is such a hot topic right now. Elliott, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me on. How are you?
I'm great. And this is a fascinating topic. People are nonstop talking about this, kind of from what is it all about all the way up to should I invest, or I did invest. Am I at risk for it being, stolen or held captive or losing it? There's so many questions to ask. And it's interesting because when you first started talking about it, you were actually recommending people to purchase Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's true. To make our position really, really clear, there's a lot of people that fit in the perma bull camp who were saying to buy it all along and are still saying to buy it. And there's people in the perma bear camp who said it was a bad idea from the beginning and are still saying that. And so we're kind of in an in-between camp because, like you said at the very beginning, when it was around 6 cents, we were recommending it to our subscribers. But now that it's $20,000, we are actually recommending to sell it and get out of it. So we've definitely changed our position from being quite bullish on it to today being quite bearish on it.
Are you shocked at what it has done and how fast it has moved along?
Very much so. I remember when it had the very first bubble in 2011, and it went from 6 cents to around $32. And then that bubble collapsed back down to about $1.80. And I remember at the time we did some technical analysis on it and projected it should reach about $100 plus. So $100 was our minimum target. So to go to 20,000 from there was we were certainly bullish at the right time, that's for sure. But it went way beyond any level that I thought was reasonable.
Now, do you think it's a strange thing to me where we're headed, because this is blown up, but now you have other computer techie type of people and companies starting to create their own cryptocurrency. So that's the weird part for me is I've heard of cloud coins and I've heard of other different things that are entering the system. Now, what's to say that we're not going to have just a ton of different companies? Because in essence, our actual physical money, you can't just create another physical money and think it's going to work in the U.S. or Canada or, around the world. But what's to stop other companies from just constantly creating this cryptocurrency?
Well, there's really nothing to stop anyone from creating a cryptocurrency. I mean, the fact that it's decentralized in particular makes it hard to regulate that process. But I think in spite of the fact that, we are bearish on the price at the moment, the fact that there are competitors is kind of a nice thing, actually. We actually saw that, even with the U.S. dollar and other government-backed currencies, the fact that, we have a more open and connected society and you can exchange between different national currencies, I think that actually helps stabilize government money somewhat. And so to see the private sector now experimenting with money and seeing those forms of private money competing against one another, I think it just means better quality in the future. And this ties into a fundamental reason, actually, why we're currently bearish on Bitcoin, which is that there are plenty of up-and-coming competitors to it with much better technical properties than it has. I don't think we've seen the currency that checks all the boxes yet, but it's certainly an ongoing competitive process, and so it's very exciting to see that.
Have you had any interaction with maybe someone to your subscribers that you've suggested, hey, purchase Bitcoin at 6 cents and we anticipate it going up to $100 plus? Have you heard back from any of them like, just so you know, I did take your advice and now I'm up to, $400,000 right now? Or,
well, I have not heard anyone give any specific numbers, but I've had a couple people send me private messages basically sending a lot of thank yous that we introduced them at that level, but they didn't tell me specifically what they did or if they sold. Because I think there's this myth that a lot of people bought it early and stayed in it to today, and certainly there are people that did that, but it's a very small group. They did analysis of it, and I think they said it was around 14 people that actually still had their coins from those low prices. A lot of people were buying pizzas. There's the guy who spent 10,000 coins on a pizza back when it was really cheap, and of course that's kind of disappointing. That would have been a $250 million at the top, but he enjoyed his pizza, I guess, and that gave him some pleasure. And in the early days, a lot of people didn't know it had that kind of price potential. And there was also a lot of concern about the fundamentals of the technology at the time, which I think a lot of has gone to the wayside, such as its ability to scale and support more users that I think are coming to the forefront now as a problem that, people had anticipated a long time ago, but kind of got ignored.
So where do you see this headed? Where do you see Bitcoin and other similar, the cryptocurrencies that are coming forth headed, with our usage in the stock market? Where's this going to go?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the time frame. So, like I said, in the early days, I think Bitcoin had a lot of potential because it was decentralized and there was definitely a niche for that. And we've seen that with the rise of the dark web and sites like that there's a niche for this kind of a thing out there. Whether you approve of the niche is another question, but it exists. And I think there are new currencies that are fulfilling that role better than Bitcoin that have emerged. But that was the early promise, was that there was a purpose for this currency for sure. The next time frame I'm seeing is the multi-year time frame, and that's where I'm very bearish on it. And there's a lot of reasons I can point to, but probably the single biggest thing I can point to for that opinion, and I don't just mean Bitcoin, I mean the entire crypto sphere,
right.
All the altcoins, is that psychologically speaking, if you look at what investors are doing, to me, this is the biggest mania we've ever seen. There was an article on Zero Hedge not too long ago where they compared all the biggest investment manias of history, and they had the Mississippi scheme up there, they had the South Sea bubble, they had the tulip mania, and they had Bitcoin, and Bitcoin dwarfs all of them to such a degree, if you try to plot them together, you can't even see the other manias. And these were huge historic things that happened. So I definitely think, we're in a mania. Psychology is crazy. People are selling their houses. One that I've been talking a lot about, just because I think it's the most extreme example, was a family that sold all their belongings, their house, liquidated their investments. They're living in a tent in the woods, and they're all smiles waiting to become multimillionaires on Bitcoin. So this kind of behavior is the type of thing you usually see when a trend is exhausting. It's sort of like what the...
You can't pay me enough to go to the bathroom in the woods. I don't care what Bitcoin's going to be worth. That's fascinating, though, that people are actually liquidating so they can purchase as many as possible and then just waiting it out. Wow.
Right, but the thing is, they weren't doing that when it was cheap and nobody cared about it. And now that it hit 20K, suddenly people are doing these insane things. And so that's something we look to say, okay, we probably hit the edges of the last sucker, to buy into this insane rally. And we're probably due for what we think is going to be a very large bear market, probably the biggest bear market we've ever seen in crypto, which is, I know, only 8 years old, but it should be a lot bigger than anything we've seen to wash all of that excess speculation out of the market. But so that's the more multi-year time frame. Then if you're talking about a multi-decade time frame, that's a completely different question. And that's something I'm actually quite bullish on. And I think on a multi-decade level, not on Bitcoin in particular, but the fundamental technology could have lots of different interesting applications. And so I definitely think there's potential there. But But right now, as an investor, I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. I think the risk of collapse is very, very high.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the other fascinating thing is we'll talk about that after the break. Do you see it replacing? Yeah, as you said, you're projecting, decades of the future, not in kind of something more current. Do you see it replacing the current dollar? Do you see us all across the world having like a cryptocurrency or maybe a variety of different cryptocurrencies, just like we have, the dollar and the euro? We have different currencies as well. And as you mentioned, some of the crazes and how they compare to other crazes. And let's take it back to like day one of the Bitcoin. Because I feel like this is something we just started talking about more and more in the media in 2017, but it actually has a history. So we'll talk about that. Again, we're talking to Elliott Prechter. He is from Elliott Wave, and he serves as the head computer analysis developing E-Waves, artificial intelligence systems for Elliott Wave analysis. He also writes the open access publication E-Waves Flash, discussing trading theory and updates readers on program developments. And in its earlier days when Bitcoin was only 6 cents, recommending, hey, thumbs up to his subscribers. And now look where they are today. So we'll talk about that and should you get involved or not. It's Kara Ro on the TKO Show. Welcome back to the TKO Show with Kara Ro. We're talking about the Bitcoin. We have been talking endlessly about this in 2017, and people, should I get in? Should I get out? You're almost like you're doing double Dutch, right? You're like, wait, should I jump in? Should I not? Should I jump in? Should I not? And Elliott Prechter joining us. He attended MIT in 2002, was with Microsoft in 2006, and then 2011 helped start an algorithmic hedge fund in Vegas. I'm reading ahead as I'm reading current. Okay, you can find him online, elliottwave.com. That's through Elliott Wave International, where he now serves as head of computer analysis, developing E-Wave's artificial intelligence system. And, talking about trading theory and updating readers on program developments. And you can see that at E-Waves Flash. So you can find them online again, elliottwave.com/Bitcoin. And Elliott, there's so many discussions about this. So, we talk about cryptocurrency and how many more are popping up. When we look back to the history of Bitcoin, and it started at, 6 cents, and now it's at $20,000. When was it generated? When did people start talking about this? Because it seems that just in the last year, we've been really talking about it, probably because of the extreme fluctuation.
Yeah, well, Bitcoin actually emerged, I think it was in 2009. So the guy came up with it basically, so that it was formed in probably around 2007, 8, and then 2009 is when it came out. And but nobody really cared. It was pretty much off the radar. Even in the first bubble in 2011, it was hardly anybody cared about it then or talked about it. When it collapsed that year to $1.80, it was, the end of Bitcoin. Then we had the 2013 bubble. That's when it went to over $1,000. But even during that time, there were some people doing some crazy stuff. There was one guy who sold his house to buy Bitcoin. So we definitely saw some of that crazy psychology at that time. But we didn't really see big media coverage. It really hasn't been till very recently. It's been, I want to say, just over the past few months, since July, when suddenly we got a flurry of emails from people interested in Bitcoin, as well as media coverage on Bitcoin, and or at least contacting us about it. And that had never happened before. But to us, that is a sign of trend exhaustion. It's usually when everybody suddenly gets interested in something that's when we're usually closer to the end of something than we are to the beginning of something. Another great example of that is the fact that they just added futures for it. A lot of people have said, hey, is it really bullish because they just added futures and now, more mainstream players can move into it? But I looked at that as kind of the opposite, and it's really analogous to, in the 70s, there was this big bull market in gold, and they finally fully legalized gold and it was, I think, marked almost the exact day when the big bull market ended, which seems counterintuitive, but it makes perfect sense if you understand it as a social trend
for sure.
Type of activity.
So at this point, your suggestion is do not touch it. Like, do not purchase it?
I wouldn't, and certainly it could go higher, but at the same time, I think the risk right now is just incredibly high with what we've seen psychologically going on with people. I think the technicals that we do on our end are showing that things are getting exhausted. And then finally, even on the fundamentals, I basically think the emperor has no clothes. We've seen transaction fees hit $20. And that's in the average case now. Ooh. So the number of businesses using Bitcoin in particular has actually been declining over the past year and a half. So there's a lot of different kind of perfect storms all coming together at once that gives us that opinion right now.
Well, we had a caller when we were on break asking, would you see this where we're going to be able to purchase groceries and, just do the regular day and not the undercover, I need to buy some guns from you or whatever else they're doing with this money? Like, do you see this in everyday life?
Well, not at the moment. I think right now everybody thinks of it as an investment asset, and it's kind of the same way people think of gold. It's not monetized. Historically, gold was monetized at certain points, and when everyone in a society uses something as money, it tends to give it a certain stability to it. But when it's just something that you think of separately as money, then people speculate, and you get all these crazy, booms and busts in the price. And Bitcoin is obviously in that stage. If it was used by an entire nation, then I think it might be different and it might be more stable and you'd price goods and services in it. But we're nowhere near that point. Whether we could get there in the future, I think that's entirely possible. I seriously doubt it would be Bitcoin itself unless they really overhauled the technology. But I think that some type of future cryptocurrency definitely would be possible. I don't think it's going to happen too soon, but one day I think that's a real possibility.
Yeah, you kind of almost can foresee a little bit of it when you can go through maybe a Tim Hortons drive-thru and just pay with your phone, like you tap it, or the tap technology with our credit cards. And it seems like we're seeing little glimpses of how it could be used where we're not really exchanging physical money too much anymore, that this is going to be something that slowly kind of merges into our everyday life.
Yeah, and it's just so convenient. I mean, I remember the very first time I ever used Bitcoin, and I sent something like $1 to some guy in Australia. And this was back before there were transaction fees because it was being used by a smaller group of people, and it was just instantaneous. It was, just as easier than sending an email because I didn't have to write a message even.
Yeah.
And it was really like magic because if you've ever used Western Union or dealt with the banking system, or if you're a business owner and you accept credit cards and then you mail the item and then they charge it back and, then you have to fight them for fraud and you have to get insurance. I mean, you look at the way the payment systems operate today and it's amazing actually how poor they really are. They don't really work that well. And so I definitely think something like Bitcoin or technology similar to that down the road is going to be very, very convenient.
Now, we just had a caller. What do you think about Ripple? I guess similar to Bitcoin. Do you know? Because I'm sure, I don't know about all the cryptocurrencies are out there,
sure.
But are there a ton out there? I'm guessing.
Oh, there's lots of different ones. Most of them are very similar to Bitcoin. Most of them are Bitcoin clones, I would call them, where they modified a few things. But there are a few that did more major changes. And Ripple is one of those that is actually quite a bit technically different from Bitcoin in terms of how it works. Really quick, the advantages of Ripple are that it's much more efficient technologically. And it can work with the existing banking system to send all kinds of assets. And it's already being used by banks to transfer dollars and euros and other kinds of things. The disadvantage side is that it's not truly a decentralized technology in the same way that the Bitcoin-based coins are. So there's two sides to it. But, you could go into so much depth because there's so many coins and they all have some advantages and disadvantages, and at some level it's kind of like, well, do you like the red ice cream, the strawberry ice cream, or the chocolate or whatever? And it's this competition between currencies that makes it very fascinating, but also very confusing and especially difficult for investors to navigate.
It's fascinating stuff. And the more we learn, it's like the more we realize we don't know. Thank you, Elliott, so much for your time. For those that are listening right now, check out the website, elliottwave.com/Bitcoin, and you can sign up for the newsletter and subscription there and get a lot of great information discussing trading theory. You can go to eWaves Flash, discussing trading theory and updates, readers on program developments as well. So make sure you check out that online. Everyone is interested in this, and in the stock market and the cryptocurrency. So Elliott Prechter joining us from Elliott Wave. So again, elliottwave.com, and you can go to /Bitcoin. It's Kara Ro on the TKO Show.